The last thing I owned in this world was a single ration bar, wrapped in silver foil, sitting in my palm like it weighed more than my own body. I had been counting days since the transport left without me. 11, I think, maybe 12. The outpost radio had gone dead on day 3, and after that, I stopped trying to reach anyone. I just tried to survive the next hour, and then the hour after that. The colony had been evacuated in a hurry. Something about a supply line collapse further out in the sector, ships pulled back to defend the core worlds, and small dust settlements like mine left to fend for themselves. I wasn't supposed to still be here. I had missed the last shuttle by 11 minutes, watched its exhaust trail bend up into a sky the color of rust, and understood in that moment that I was now, officially, on my own. I had rationed everything I could find, water first, because a person can go longer without food than without water. Then the dry stores in the supply shed, then whatever I could scavenge from the abandoned houses nearby. And now here I was, sitting on the edge of a collapsed loading dock, holding the very last thing I had left to eat. I was about to open it when I heard the sound. It was small. A scrape, then a whisper of movement, coming from behind a stack of broken storage crates near the shed. My hand went instinctively to the length of pipe I kept beside me, not because I wanted trouble, but because on a dead colony, trouble usually announces itself quietly before it announces itself loudly. "Who's there?" I said, my voice rough from disuse. Nothing answered, but the crates shifted again, just slightly. I stood up, keeping my movements slow, and walked toward the sound. My legs felt hollow with hunger, and each step took more effort than it should have. When I rounded the crates, I stopped. 2 shapes were pressed into the shadow of the loading dock. At first, in the dim light, I thought they were some kind of animal, curled together for warmth. Then one of them lifted its head, and I saw the face, narrow, angular, with skin the pale blue-gray of an overcast sky, and eyes far too large for the thin face around them. Not human, alien, but something about the posture, the way the smaller one pressed into the side of the larger one, was unmistakably, painfully familiar. It was the posture of someone protecting someone else. Sisters, I would learn later, though at the time, all I understood was that I was looking at 2 children, and they were starving. The larger one, I would come to know her as Vess, pushed herself slightly in front of the smaller one, bearing nothing, no weapon, no threat, just her own thin body between me and her sister. Her arms trembled with the effort of holding herself upright. I raised my hands slowly, palms out, the universal sign that seemed to translate across most species I had ever encountered. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, keeping my voice low and even, the way you'd talk to a frightened animal, though I meant no disrespect by the comparison. Fear does not care what species wears it. Vess didn't move. Her eyes tracked to the ration bar still clutched in my other hand, and something in her expression cracked open for just a second. A flash of hunger so raw, it looked almost like pain. I looked down at the bar. My last meal. I had been rationing my strength around the promise of it for the better part of a day, telling myself, just get to sunset and you can eat. I looked back at the 2 of them. The smaller sister's ribs were visible even through the strange, close-fitting fabric she wore. Her breathing was too fast, too shallow. I don't know how long I stood there, caught between the animal logic of my own hunger and something else, something quieter, but somehow louder at the same time. I knelt down, slow enough that neither of them flinched, and I broke the ration bar in half. Then, after a moment, I broke one of those halves again, leaving myself the smallest piece. I held out the 2 larger pieces. Vess stared at my hand like it might be some kind of trick. I understood the hesitation. On a colony gone quiet and lawless, kindness was a rare enough currency that it made people suspicious. I kept my hand steady and waited. It was the smaller sister who moved first. She reached out with fingers that shook, took the piece closest to her, and immediately pressed it into Vess's hands instead of eating it herself. That single act told me everything I needed to know about who these 2 were to each other. "Eat," I said softly, though I doubted the word meant anything to them. I mimed the motion instead, bringing my own small piece to my mouth. Vess looked at her sister, some silent conversation passing between them, and then, finally, she broke off a piece for the younger one and ate the rest herself. We sat there together, the three of us, in the long shadow of the loading dock, eating what was left of the only food I had. It should have felt like a loss. It didn't. It felt, strangely, like the first thing I had done in days that made any sense. I learned their names through gestures and patience over the following hour. Vess, the older one, communicated mostly through careful, deliberate movements, like she was translating each thought before she let it out. Her sister was called Ren, and she was younger, maybe by only a year or two in whatever their species counted as years, though it was hard to say for certain given how thin and small she looked. They had been left behind too, I gathered, though the details were harder to piece together. A transport error maybe, a miscommunication between species that didn't share a border often enough to trust each other's signals. Whatever the cause, they had been hiding in the ruins of the colony for days, same as me, surviving on less than I had, because unlike me, they had started with nothing at all. Night fell hard and fast on that colony, the way it always did on worlds with thin atmospheres. I built a small fire from scrap wood in the shelter of the loading dock, more for the light than the warmth, since none of us could afford to be found by whatever might still be moving out in the dark. Ren fell asleep almost instantly, curled against her sister's side. Vess stayed awake a while longer, watching me with those large, careful eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Her voice was accented strangely, the words shaped by a mouth not built quite the same as mine, but the meaning came through clear enough. I hadn't realized until then that she spoke my language at all. "You could talk this whole time?" I asked, more surprised than annoyed. "A little. Trade language. My mother taught me some, before." She didn't finish the sentence, and I didn't ask her to. "You didn't have to share your food," she said again, like the fact of it still didn't sit right with her. "Neither did you," I said, nodding toward where she'd broken off a piece for Ren before eating any herself. Something in her face shifted at that, not quite a smile, but close to it. "You are the last one here?" she asked. "The only human?" "As far as I know." "Why didn't you leave?" "I missed the transport." She studied me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide whether that was the whole truth, or just the version I was comfortable telling a stranger. In the end, she let it go. We didn't talk much more that night. I kept watch while they slept, and somewhere near dawn, exhaustion finally caught up with me too. I woke to the sound of engines. Not the low grinding hum of a scavenger's shuttle, but something bigger, cleaner, the kind of sound that belonged to a proper ship with proper maintenance. I was on my feet with the pipe in hand before I was even fully awake, positioning myself between the sisters and the sound. The ship that descended through the thin clouds was not human. Its hull was smooth and pale, curved in ways that made me think of something grown rather than built. It settled onto the cracked landing pad beyond the colony's edge, and a ramp lowered with a soft hiss. Vess was on her feet instantly, and for a moment, I thought she might run. Then I saw her expression change, disbelief giving way to something like hope. "That's my mother's ship," she said, her voice cracking. "That's—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Figures came down the ramp, tall and careful in their movements, scanning the ruins of the colony with quiet urgency. When the lead figure caught sight of Vess and Ren, the search became a run. What followed was not something I had words for, not in my own language, and certainly not in theirs. A mother finding two daughters she believed she might never see again. I stood back and let it happen, feeling like an intruder on something too private for me to witness, though none of them seemed to mind me being there. It was Vess who pulled me forward eventually, saying something quick and urgent to her mother in their own language. I caught my name in the middle of it, mangled slightly by an unfamiliar tongue, but recognizable. The mother turned to look at me properly for the first time. Her eyes held the same shape as her daughter's, though there were lines of exhaustion and fear around them that spoke of days spent searching a colony she had feared was already lost. "You fed them," she said. It wasn't a question. "It wasn't much," I said, feeling suddenly aware of how small the gesture had been in the light of day. "Half a ration bar, split 3 ways." "It was everything you had," she said, and I realized Vess must have told her exactly how little that ration bar was. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. What happened over the following hour happened faster than I could properly track. There was talk of debts, though the word felt wrong for what was being offered. There was talk of passage, of safety, of a place among their people, that came with none of the strings I might have expected from a species I had known for less than a day. I tried to explain that I hadn't done it for a reward, that the idea of being repaid for sharing a meal felt almost embarrassing, given how small the meal had been. The mother only shook her head at that, in a gesture that seemed to cross species lines easily enough. "That is exactly why it matters," she said. "Anyone can be generous with plenty. You had nothing, and you gave anyway." I boarded that ship a few hours later, leaving behind a dead colony that no longer had any hold on me. I didn't know yet what the future held, what it would mean to owe my life to two starving sisters I had met over a broken ration bar. I only knew that somewhere between hunger and dawn, I had made a choice that cost me everything I had left, and it had given me back more than I ever thought I'd have again. Sometimes the smallest thing a person has to give turns out to be the thing that changes everything.